Today, I'm gonna show you how to remove branding from any photo in Photoshop. Hey there and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on phlearn.com where we make learning fun. And today's tutorial, I'm super excited about. Removing branding is very important for a number of reasons. Oftentimes clients won't want other brands in their photos, so you're gonna have to remove those in Photoshop or during the photo shoot. Maybe you're going to submit your images to a stock image website like Adobe Stock. You can't have any brands visible in those photos as well, so you're gonna have to remove them in Photoshop. And sometimes brands just a little bit distracting, so maybe you wanna get rid of them just for your own sake. In today's example, we've got a great photo that you can download for free, as well as this PSD on phlearn.com. So follow the link right down below and kind of see how we did everything. This photo is super cool because we actually have 10 different brands we're gonna be removing in this single image. You're gonna learn how to do so using the spot healing brush tool, the regular healing brush tool, the clone stamp tool, the actual brush tool in some cases, selections, and even show you how to add texture to areas. We've got an awesome tutorial for you. Let's jump into Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop. I went ahead and outlined all of our brands. Believe it or not, we got 10 different brands that we're going to be removing from this single photo. That's right, all of these in today's free tutorial. So let's go ahead and make a new layer. I'm gonna group it with itself and we're just gonna call this Hoodie. There we are. And we're gonna start off with the spot healing brush tool. I always recommend starting with the spot healing brush tool because it does a lot of the work for you. So J for the spot healing brush tool, just make sure you're set to content aware and sample all layers. And then we're simply gonna paint right over top of our logo that we're going to be removing. So in this case, we're gonna remove the Hoodie logo first. There we go. Now, usually I don't try to get the whole logo gone in the first try. We're just basically gonna remove as much as we can. There we go. And this is our first pass. So if it doesn't look exactly right, that's totally okay. We can come back and do this with a second and third pass. That's a lot of the case in Photoshop. When I first started using Photoshop, I kind of thought these tools basically, like, if it didn't do it perfect, I was like, that's not the right tool for the job. But oftentimes the case is we need a couple different tools to get the job done in entirety. So the spot healing brush tool is fantastic. And as you can see, it's done a lot of the job for us, but it's not perfect. So then we move to the regular healing brush tool. Now with the regular healing brush tool, we can actually choose our own sample point. So let's create a new layer. We want to make sure we're set to sample current and below. There we go. And then we hold Alt or Option to sample areas and then simply paint over the areas that you want to fill in. So this is going to take the texture from the area that you're sampling and the color from the area that you're painting, and it's gonna blend them together again, okay? So this is a really great blending tool, but it doesn't work for edges. Notice what it does around my edge. It just kind of tries to blur everything together. So that's not really going to work. So really good on areas like this where we just have like, black hoodie with some flare and things like that. But when it comes to edges, that's when we want to move to the next tool in our arsenal, which is the clone stamp tool. So now let's go ahead and show you the clone stamp tool. New layer, S for the clone stamp tool. This is perfect for edges. Okay, now in this case, we're gonna hold Alt or Option and sample. I'm gonna make a nice small brush and we're just gonna paint right here along this edge. Perfect, which is gonna help out with that edge. I'm gonna choose a larger brush. By the way, I'm creating a lot of layers in this tutorial, and I recommend you do so as well because there's nothing wrong with a bunch of layers. It'll help you undo or redo anything that you need to get done in Photoshop. There you can see. So I used a smaller clone stamp tool for smaller areas and a larger brush with my clone stamp tool when I want to work on larger areas. There we go. Let's create another layer and we're gonna just clone stamp from here right over here and simply remove all of that. This is why the clone stamp tool is so good, because it's not gonna try to blend anything together. It's just a simple copy from one area over to another area. So anytime you have edges, the clone stamp tool is your tool of choice. Now, if you do want to do a little blending with the clone stamp tool, you can lower the flow of the brush, the clone stamp, by hitting Shift and then 1 through 10 on your keyboard. This is gonna allow you to create a little bit more blending, so you're not basically clone stamping at 100%, you're using a little bit of a lower clone stamp. Okay, there we go. And now we're gonna spot heal everything back together again. Looking fantastic, and we're almost done. So basically we just want to remove all these artifacts and anything that give hints that there was something there, because basically we have a light flare in front of this, and we just should have a nice smooth gradient in front of that light flare. All right, if it does anything you don't want, either hit undo, or you can just redo right over top of your previous paint. And that's looking really, really nice. I'm just gonna do a new layer real quick. See how we have a little line here? I'm gonna hit L for my lasso tool, and then hold Alt or Option. There we go. And just make a little selection like that. B for the brush tool, and I'm gonna hit Controller Command H to hide that. All right, just paint that in. Then I'm gonna hit Controller Command T. We're just gonna move this right over here, kind of move that over, and then give this a little bit of a blur. I just thought, hey, a little bit more detail never hurt, right? All right, Controller Command T, we're gonna right click, and I'm just gonna warp that to where it kind of fits. Perfect. There we go. And the logo on our hoodie is completely gone. So next we're gonna move into one of my favorite tools in Photoshop, which is the brush tool. Super easy to use. Just use a large soft edge brush. Right click, and you're gonna wanna make sure that your size is large and your hardness is set to 0. You can also hold Control, Option, click and drag to the left and the right, which will change your brush size. Up and down will change your brush hardness. And if you're on a PC, it's gonna be Alt, Control, right click and drag. Now, the secret with using the brush tool here is to use a low flow. So I'm gonna hit Shift 2 on my keyboard, and that's gonna change my brush flow. You can see right up here at the top, it's gonna change my brush flow to 20%. Now, if you wanna see the difference between brush flow and opacity, you can click on the screen or on the link down below. We have great free tutorials explaining the difference between those two. They're really good to know, but basically I use flow most of the time. So here we are. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option to sample colors, and then simply paint right over top of a logo. Amazing. Now I think about the brush tool and my personal history with Photoshop. For many years, I was relying on tools like the clone stamp and the spot healing and things like that to get these sort of jobs done. But they always seemed a little bit lacking, especially when you had areas of gradients and things like this. It's hard to know where to sample with tools like that. But with the brush tool, you can just basically paint in exactly what you want. It's very, very effective. Okay, so think about yourself as like a master painter. You can just grab the brush tool and paint literally whatever you want. There we are. Let's hold Alt or Option. We're gonna sample these. So you can see this is a darker color down here, right? This is a lighter color up there. So how do you blend them two together? Just create a little bit of a larger brush, sample this color, paint it in a little bit over there, sample that color, paint it in a little bit over there, sample that color, paint it in, sample this color, paint it in, and just start blending them in, okay? And this is using a low flow. You don't have to be super zoomed in to get this done either. You can be zoomed out. You can use a larger brush than what you think you need, and then, boop, pop a layer mask on it by clicking on your layer mask icon. All right, I have a keyboard shortcut set up to add a layer mask, which is super helpful. And then just layer mask it away where you don't want it to be visible. And there we go, gone with the brush tool. Now, those are relatively simple applications. Let's move into a more advanced application. We're gonna create a new layer and remove this entire logo with just the brush tool. That's right, check it out. So we're gonna start off, B for the brush tool. I'm gonna sample this color over here and start painting it in. So we're gonna start off painting in just my little logos. Okay, getting rid of my letters here. There we go. So again, we've got a gradient. Notice how it's lighter on the left side and darker on the right side. So I'm gonna start off just by painting these away. Fantastic. Painting these away. Don't worry about making it perfect. Don't worry about that light beam that's going right through the words. We're gonna get that in just a second. There we go. We just wanna get that logo out of there, get that brand out of there. Okay, then you're like, okay, well that looks kind of good, but kind of not good too. So you'd be right by saying that, because it does look kind of good, but kind of not good. So now what we're gonna do is start blending all this together. We're gonna create a new layer, B for the brush tool, and now we're gonna make a larger brush. When you wanna blend things together, use a large brush, okay? Now I know this is gonna paint other areas than just this little strip, but that's okay. I'll show you how to take care of that. Hold Alt or Option and sample this area over here, and then even larger brush, okay? Then Alt or Option and sample these areas over there and paint them together. And you can even zoom out to get a bigger perspective on the overall blending of everything, okay? And use a low flow. I'm using a flow about 10% right now. You just wanna make sure you've got a nice even gradient from light to dark. And that's looking pretty good. Only slight little issue here is it's painting outside of that little area. Simple. Put a layer mask on there, and then we're just going to paint black on our layer mask where we don't want it to be visible. Just make a smaller brush and paint it away. There we go, a smaller brush, paint away. Okay, and here you can see we're looking really, really good. Now we do have a couple of things that we do want to take care of. One, we got to get that light beam in there. Okay, that's going to be super important. Okay, easy to do. Create a new layer. Now I like to hit R for the rotate canvas. There we go. And I can hit B for the brush tool, sample that lighter color, and then check that out. Boom, paint in a light ray. Easier than you thought, right? Just paint it in there, right? Pretend you're a painter, because you are. You're a painter. Okay, just lower the opacity a little bit, and that looks great. Now we do got a couple more things I want to take care of. One, I just want to clone stamp in to just clean up this edge down here a little bit. So Alt or Option to clone stamp that edge a little bit there. So this looks great, but we've got one problem. There's no texture on this area we painted. It's just really smooth. Now there are a lot of ways you can add texture in Photoshop. One of the easiest ways is just to use the healing brush tool. Most often we use the healing brush tool to take away texture, but you can use it to add texture as well. So on a new layer, I'm gonna hit J for our healing brush tool, and then I'm gonna sample an area that has the texture that I want and simply start painting over the area that I want the texture to be. Okay, it's gonna take that texture and put it right over here while keeping the underlying colors completely intact. So there we go, just sampling this over here, painting it over there, and boom, we have instant texture. Not only do we have instant texture, by the way, but we have instant texture that perfectly matches the rest of our photograph. How cool is that? So there we go, now we have perfect texture. All right, and I just want to add a little bit more light there, again, just with our brush tool. So, how cool is that? We were able to completely remove that logo with the brush tool and then use the healing brush tool to pop over top texture. So if you're ever in the situation where you're like, I don't have any texture, it doesn't look real, healing brush tool to the rescue. Now we're gonna move on to the shoes, which we're gonna use a combination of different tools. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, group it together, and call this shoes. So again, we're gonna start off with our spot healing brush tool. By the way, you can hold down Shift and hit J to cycle between your any tools basically in Photoshop, because they're nested. So you can see spot healing brush tool and healing brush tool, they're nested together. So if you hold Shift and hit the keyboard shortcut for those tools, it's gonna cycle between them. There we go. So now we are going to remove our little swoosh here. Sorry, Nike, we just can't have you in the photo. All right, there's a big part of me that just wants to clean up these shoes, but that's not for today. All right, now we're gonna pop over to the regular healing brush tool and just kind of blend some of these things together. Fantastic. Anywhere the spot healing brush tool doesn't do the exact job you want, that's when you pop into the regular healing brush tool. Okay, it's gonna be there for you, like an old friend. Always around. There we are. Fantastic. Now we're coming into an area here where things don't look exactly right. So first I'm going to start off with the clone stamp tool to kind of like clean up my canvas a little bit, because we've got some weird kind of like fading going on that is left over from things like the healing brush tool. So the clone stamp tool just creates a direct copy. So if you got any areas that are just kind of like looking a little blurry or fadey, you know, clone stamp tool is the way to go. Next, I need to extend this over here. So how do we do that? On a new layer, I'm gonna hit S for the clone stamp tool. Make sure you're sampling the current and below layer. Then I'm gonna sample this little area of stitching and then just paint it wherever I want to. It doesn't really matter where you paint it because we're gonna use the move tool to move it. All right, so we got some stitching right over here. Now I can hit V for the move tool. I did that on a new layer. So now I got stitching I can put wherever I want. So let's go ahead and hit Controller Command T on our stitching. We're gonna right click and I'm gonna go to warp, okay? Now with warp enabled, we're just gonna literally do exactly what it says. We are going to warp this into place. You can hit Controller Command H, okay? And that's gonna help you warp it. And if it's not acting exactly the way you want, maybe you should adjust the warp a little bit first. So Controller Command T, let's just put this a little bit over there. I'm gonna rotate it around first so I'm not reliant on the warp so much. And then we'll go to the warp. Controller Command H will hide the outer boundaries so you can just focus on your warp. I can't focus on anything right now. I'm trying to warp. And that's looking pretty good. So let's hit enter there. It's gonna apply that transformation, but we got a little issue here. It doesn't look real. So first thing we're gonna do is add a layer mask and I'm gonna just mask in the bottom part of it. So just mask this away just by painting black on the layer mask. Okay, there we go. Controller Command T, let's just warp that right into place a little bit. Boom, enter. Now the top part's too dark. No big deal. We can grab a curves adjustment layer. Now by default, the curves adjustment layer is gonna make everything either lighter or brighter, lighter or darker. But check this out. If I click on this clipping mask icon, it's only going to affect the layer under it, right? So if I just wanna make it a little bit brighter, like that, okay, now I'm gonna invert the layer mask on the curves adjustment layer, paint white right here, and then on the layer mask for this area, paint black. I'm able to blend those together. So this curves adjustment layer is literally making the top part of this little clone area that I made brighter and the bottom part darker, which is helping the two blend together again. And if you have any additional cleanup that you wanna do, don't forget about your good friend, the clone stamp tool, where you can just kind of clone this in. Boom, check that out. So we're gonna do something similar for the second shoe. We're just gonna speed it up a little bit. It's kind of basically the same thing. Alrighty, now let's do this finishing part here together. We're gonna create a new layer, S for the clone stamp tool. We got a little edge that's fuzzy here and doesn't look real, so we just clone stamp that away with a real small brush to give that a nice, good edge. We're gonna create a new layer, S for the clone stamp tool. Again, clone stamping this area onto a new location. Controller Command T, let's put that in its new location. Oh, you're gonna love your new home. Right click and go to warp, and here we go. We're just gonna warp you right into place, and you are just going to love your new home. There we go. Now, again, if you wanna do any additional blending, don't forget you got your brush tool and you are a master painter. So just grab your brush tool, grab a tiny little brush, and just boom, finish up your blending job with your tiny little brush, and you're good to go. Look at that. Boom. We just added that little thing back there. New layer over top of this. We got a little highlight right here I don't want. Just clone stamp from an area that's right next to it, and you're good to go. R for the rotate tool, shift to get back to up and down. And we are gone. Let's go ahead and group all of those, and we can see we completely removed our shoes as well. Alrighty, we're doing great. We got a couple more logos to go. So let's go ahead and zoom in right to this next area. We're gonna create a new layer and start off with, yep, you guessed it, the spot healing brush tool. So let's go ahead and paint this in here. Basically, I just wanna get rid of these little areas. Fantastic. And just like ooh, it kind of added a little streak. I kind of like that, actually. I think it's kind of cool. Now, in this case, we can actually do a couple of things. I kind of like this outer little area. Let's just remove this, right? I guess the, I can't pronounce that name. I have no idea what that even says. If you know how to pronounce that, leave it in a comment down below. Let's remove this thing too, because I'm just guessing that's probably the logo of this company here. But I want to leave this outer detail because I think it's nice. Now, on a new layer, how do we get all this, right? Because it's like, ooh, that's kind of cool. I need like some light there. Well, brush tool again, you guessed it. B for the brush tool, and we're gonna hold Alt or Option. I'm just gonna paint in like little circles here to kind of like try to build in some randomness and some variation. I'm gonna S for the clone stamp tool here and build this in, okay? There we go. I got a little preview of what I'm gonna paint, which helps out a lot. There we are. And then B for the brush tool, we're just gonna kind of paint this in right over here. Fantastic. So we're just brush tooling this in. And again, think about these things as like a few different steps. Like right now, it doesn't look good. It looks a little bit too choppy. There's no texture on it, things like that. So let's go ahead and zoom out. Let's make sure we have a nice even fade from light to dark. Use a low flow. I'm using a flow of about 10% here. There we go. So sampling these colors, and then we're just kind of painting right in. There we are, painting right in. This is looking really, really good. Okay, the last thing I want to do here, we just want to add a little bit of texture. Now I'm going to show you a different way to add texture than we did earlier, because, ooh, we can even fix this. Hey, check it out, your decal is back. Bing! I'm going to create a new layer, grab my brush tool, and I'm going to grab this really light color near the jeans and just paint my border back with a small brush. See? It's all in the details. So I want to show you a different technique for adding texture here. We're actually going to be using noise to do this, believe it or not. Let's create a new layer. I'm going to hit M for the marquee tool. Just select the area where you want to add your noise. Hit Shift, Delete, and then fill this with 50% gray. Okay, you can also go to Edit and down to Fill. 50% gray. This is going to be invisible if we set it to soft light, but the noise we add to this 50% gray will be visible. So let's show you how to do it. Super easy here. Go ahead and change this from normal to soft light. 50% gray becomes invisible. Then we go to Filter, we go to Noise, and I go to Add Noise. There we go. Now I can add some noise to this. Of course, you can choose your amount here. I'm going to choose about 5. That looks pretty good. You have a few different options in terms of how you'd like your noise to look. Let's go ahead and choose Gaussian and monochromatic. Fantastic. Let's hit OK there. Now we just want this noise to be visible in just this area. So we put a layer mask on it. So just click on your layer mask icon. There we are. Fill your layer mask with black, and then go ahead and just paint it visible exactly where you want noise. And you've got instant texture. Now you can change a lot about this noise too. Okay, if you want your noise to be bigger, click on your layer, unlink your layer and your layer mask, because I don't want to scale my layer mask, right? The mask I want to be in the same place, but the layer, maybe I want to make the noise bigger. So hit Control or Command T, and then I can just simply make my noise a little bit bigger if I want to. Hit Enter there. Okay, maybe not that big. It was starting to get a little bit lower quality. That looks pretty good there. And then I can just simply lower the opacity. So we basically added a noise texture over top of that, and look at how well it's flowing with our photo. And by the way, did I mention you can still paint underneath your noise texture if you wanted to, okay? So if you need to do any final cleanup, no problem. Grab your brush tool and paint over there, and you got your noise texture over top, which is going to help with a little bit of added realism and complete that effect. Fantastic, and that looks pretty dang good. We got a couple more things to take care of here. Let's go ahead and group everything together, and we're gonna be using my trusty brush tool because we've got a lot of gradients to work with. So B for the brush tool, there we go. All right, Alt or Option to sample, and we're just gonna simply paint over it. The brush tool is something that I underestimated for years, and now it's my go-to for a lot of these difficult situations. All right, there we go. Look at this. I'm not even sure if this is part of the logo, but if it is, I can get rid of it very easily. This would be very difficult for a tool like the Spot Healing Brush tool because it's not going to know where it should and should not sample. But with a brush tool, no problem. grab a new layer, Alt or Option to sample here, and paint over there. See, if you just do one color, it's gonna look like that. So make sure you sample again, lower your brush flow, which will kind of like allow you to blend things together, and then paint it back in like that, okay? So you wanna sample a couple times, paint over it a couple times, use a larger brush than you might think you would need, and then just mask it away from the areas you don't want it to be visible. Okay, now we're almost done. Can you believe it? Let's go ahead and just turn this little outline back on to make sure, yep, that one's gone, that one's gone, that one's gone, our hoodie is gone, there we go, our shoes. The last one we're gonna take care of is here on our helmet, and we've got some reflections. So there's a great technique for this. We're gonna use the pen tool to make some selections, and then we're gonna be able to paint reflections without a logo. Check this out. So P for the pen tool, just click, and then I'm gonna go down here and click and drag in that way. And that's gonna make that little curve. Then we hold Alt or Option. I'm gonna grab that point and put it up there. Boom. Click and drag in that location. Hold Alt or Option. And there we go. So we have our first pen path. This is gonna be the outline of our reflection. So let's go to our path. I'm just gonna call this helmet 2, because I've done this before. There we go. Let's go ahead and click again. This is gonna be in the same path again, by the way. So click and drag there, Alt or Option, and boop. There we go. And then click and drag right up here. So this is allowing us to make very precise selections. There we go. That looks really good. And now we're gonna go over here and basically just do the same thing. Okay, so this is all within the same pen path, technically. There we are, and we're gonna make all of it a selection at the same time. Click there, and we got one more to go. We're just gonna click and drag there. I'm gonna kind of make it up because I can't really see it, but any detail is better than no detail. Fantastic, and let's bring this around there and close that off. So now we're gonna make all of those into a selection by right-clicking on our path and go down to Make Selection. We're gonna feather this by 0.5 pixels. All right, in this case, it just selected that one. So I'm actually going to hit deselect, and then I gotta click off and click back on. It was just selecting the most active one. So we right-click, and then we'll go to Make Selection again, 0.5 pixels, and then you can see they're all selected. So now that they're all selected, think about this as two different selections. So we have a selection of the reflections, but if I inverse my selection, we have a selection of everything else too. So let's start there. We're gonna create a new layer. We're gonna go to Select and then down to Inverse. Okay, so now everything except those areas is selected. And then I'm gonna hit B for the brush tool, and I'm just gonna brush tool away this logo. Now, if you don't want those little marching ants, those little dots there, hit Controller Command H, okay? And if this is your first time hitting Controller Command H, it's gonna say Hide Photoshop or Hide Extras. Just click on Hide Extras. So now I'm able to paint away everything outside of those reflections. Can you believe how cool that is? I actually want a little bit of this color, so I'm gonna just grab our brush tool, sample B for the brush tool with a big brush, and paint with like a 10% flow, just for a little bit of light variation here. I don't want it to just be the same color, because nothing's kind of just the same color. Okay, so we just did that outside of the reflection. Now, all I have to do is go to Select and then down to Inverse, which is right over there. Okay, and now we're selecting the actual reflection. So again, with the brush tool, let's hit Controller Command H to hide that again. With the brush tool, check this out. I'm just painting inside of that reflection now, okay? That's it, just inside of the reflection. That's the only area that's getting painted now. And then just paint in some, some false detail. Doesn't really matter what it is, just as long as it looks like it has some detail there. There we go. Fantastic, because it's just kind of covering it right up. There we go, and I can kind of make it fade out by choosing a dark color and painting it in, just like that. And then we deselect, and I'm gonna do a tiny little bit of cleanup right around here, around the edges, again, just with our brush tool. And look at that. We're able to completely paint in, not only the logo were painted away, but we also did it while keeping reflections completely intact. Let's go ahead and group those. Make sure we've removed all of these logos, which we have. Complete removal of branding. Let's group them all. There we go. And let's see the before and after. Here's our before and the after. Let's go ahead and zoom into a couple key points. Here's our before and the after, and then up here for the helmet and the hoodie, there's our before and the after. And I recorded it this time. I actually hit screen record this time. Last time I forgot to record the screen, so that'll happen sometimes. Thank you so much for watching today's tutorial. If you want to get more free tutorials, click on that subscribe icon. Give us a little thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Now, if you want to become a Photoshop power user, we're talking retouching, compositing, special effects, all kinds of things that are going to help you improve your images. Check out Phlearn Pro. Thank you so much. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.